Hello, everybody. Welcome to another session of 10 Minutes of RGM. I'm your host, Oko Hinteding, and I'm excited today to be joined by Murtaza. Murtaza, would you like to do a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Murtaza, currently part of the Coca Cola Company, where I've been engaged in revenue growth management for 4 years. Prior to joining Coke, I was with Kraft Heinz Canada, where I also operated in the revenue growth management domain. So, all in all, collectively, it's my seventh consecutive year in RGM, and I hold an accounting and finance background. So, it's always great to continue to operate in that sphere.
Interesting. So thanks for joining us. I wanted to ask you also, you mentioned you've done tactical RGM as well as more strategical RGM. What would you say is one of the big differences between the two, or what do you like most about each of
Mhm.
them?
Tactical revenue growth management, it's more like downstream RGM, where you are working with select customers in select channels with certain individuals, and you have ownership to execute and implement some of the strategic revenue growth management guidances that are cascaded down for that specific area. When it comes to strategic RGM, it has a much more broader purview. So you're not confined to select channels or select customers. You're strategically planning across different channels with different retailers, across different categories. I personally feel that has a more broader or a strategic fit, whereas tactical is more around day-to-day revenue growth management.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. Tactical, maybe more the executional side of things in the day-to-day, and strategic, the wider lens indeed. Over the next 12 months, which RGM trends will matter the most for your business, and where will you focus your team's efforts?
I would say affordability-led price to pack architecture that will continue to be stronger theme in the upcoming 12 months, given the geopolitical and macroeconomic landscape. Eventually, end consumer, they start to feel the pinch, and therefore, I would feel that affordability, offering value to your shopper, would be of utmost importance. Besides that, I would say promo effectiveness and simplification will be incredibly important in the months and years to come, because you really want to dedicate your precious trade and spend dollars in running promotions that deliver the best return on investment. Besides that, I would say intentional or proactive mix management, like your ability to take price, it's getting confined and it's very restrictive, it's very limited as days go by. And therefore, as RGM experts, we need to be evaluating mix favorability and mix accretive options to drive further revenue growth for the company. And I'd say with increased automation and with so much happening in the artificial intelligence space, I would argue that advanced analytics will be the golden standard. And therefore, this is something where RGM teams in particular will have to really hone in on in the upcoming 12
Mm.
months.
Let's talk a little bit more about the affordability, because that's the interesting one that made me think. Because affordability to me, it means, right, the consumer is still able to actually buy the products that, we want them to buy. And quite often in RGM, we do a price elasticity study, for example, and it shows, you can take price up to a certain amount and then your volume will still be stable, or expect this and this to happen to your profitability. When we speak about affordability, what sense do you then also collaborate with marketing, like brand marketing, in terms of, okay, should we actually take this price, and how is this price going to impact the positioning in the market, not only from a P&L perspective, but how will that resonate with the affordability of the consumer?
So, how we define affordability is all about perceived value, right?
Mhm.
Something could be affordable for a person X, and that exact same thing could be less affordable or unaffordable for person Y. And since it's all about perception, the role of marketing becomes incredibly important and critical just because they need to deliver and fulfill that perception and that promise. So, if there are shoppers that are looking for an entry price that can be our gateway to our portfolio, all the marketing material, all the communication, and all the messaging needs to be consistent and should tie in with the right affordability message. Also within portfolio segmentation, there are certain packages that are more skewed towards your affordable and low income shopper. And therefore, when you're developing your marketing programs, you need to be mindful of who your shopper is, what packages play an affordability role, and then work cross-functionally with marketing as an example to ensure we are staying consistent in our messaging.
That also goes hand in hand with the third point that you mentioned around mix management, right? What role does which pack play, and how do you ensure you optimize your mix management? A little bit more about that, and then I think especially in terms of price positioning of different packs, and then how does that relate to the mix?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I were to back up for a moment, mix is something which drives accretiveness in your revenue by focusing on either on categories or packages that carry a higher revenue or profit, or you're focusing on channels or customers that are more profitable or more revenue accretive for you as a company. So that's how you define mix. I believe RGM teams are divided into two subsegments, or companies overall are divided into two categories. One is companies that are victim of mix, and one set of companies are those which are actually proactively and intentionally driving mix. And it's more of a journey. So in your initial years of RGM, if let's say this function is underdeveloped, you will be more like strategizing and executing. And then towards the end, when you're running those numbers and evaluating your performance, you will identify that there are certain packages or certain channels that were overly focused or disproportionately grown that ended up hurting you from a mix perspective. But on the other hand, companies that have really mastered the art of revenue growth management, they're very intentional in their strategic choices. They'll focus on packages, they'll focus on customers, they'll focus on channels, which can deliver superior profitability and revenue for the company. So that's how I feel intentional, proactive mix management would be a key priority for good RGM teams in the upcoming 12 months.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Also mentioned automation and the use of AI, and the question that I have there, to what extent do you see this accelerating, or do you see this getting more priority in your current role or your company versus a couple of years ago?
Companies are intentionally investing a lot in and around automation. And that is because speed to market and agility is now more important than ever. It is basically a tool or a tactic to unlock your leverage and get that competitive edge in today's fast-paced environment. So companies that really invest in automation, in AI tools, and ensuring that strategies are delivered, worked upon, and executed quickly will always have a leading edge. So tools like Microsoft Copilot or any other functionality can help you really run multiple what-if scenarios. You can do quick financial modeling. So as opposed to work that was done by, let's say, 4 or 5 individuals spanning across multiple weeks, can now be done with fewer resources and in a shorter span of time. And that is where the true unlock is.
Interesting. Where do you see RGM is helping to solve internal misalignment between areas like sales, finance, and supply chain?
I believe when it comes to misalignment, it's maybe because there are different sources of truth within an organization. The way RGM should operate is it should be at an intersection. It's more of a connector, it's more of a mediator, right? Where we are bringing cross-functional resources under one umbrella, under one roof, and then defining shared metrics, more like a win-win approach. So when you have a single source of truth, you're working towards a common goal. That is where you can substantially, reduce misalignment.
Yeah. And does it then also mean that you see a big responsibility for RGM to make sure all this data is actually aligned and coming together in the right tooling?
Absolutely. So it is super important to look at the right set of numbers because we are increasingly living in an environment where data is what's driving outcomes and driving decisions. So if you're looking at wrong facts, if you're not discerning or interpreting facts in the right way, then the strategies you'll recommend or or plans you work on may eventually fail.
Making sure everybody works with the same source of truth is already a big achievement in many cases. If you had to make one bold prediction about RGM 5 years from now, what would this be and why?
5 years from now, I think RGM will be always on. So it's not as if you only need the RGM function when you're evaluating certain promotions or when you're passing on or working on delivering an annual price increase. So I feel down the road, it will be something which is always on and increasingly automated, to my point earlier. So rather than focusing on day to day, you're just working on annual strategies, you're working on day-to-day data-driven exercises. So it's more around getting more automated and being always available and being always on top of driving strategic outcomes.
Always on RGM. I like it. Yeah, definitely. So what would you say are some of the learnings you have from the beginning of your career that still shape the way how you approach RGM today?
I do have an accounting and finance background, as I mentioned earlier, and that really equips you and with certain capabilities. So numbers, they come naturally. And understanding of the numbers, understanding trends, looking at large data sets, being comfortable in working through large data sets, right? So all of those tendencies and all of those conceptual, or I would say financial acumen, really helps in unlocking value when you're working in RGM. As years go by, as you get more and more seasoned in your role, there are other aspects like communication, storytelling, influencing, soft skills. So like all of those start becoming increasingly important. But something that should always stay with you is your command over key financial concepts. And I think if you have developed or if you're able to build a strong foundation in the early stages of your career, your transition into RGM and then getting successful in that role become super high.
I can definitely resonate with that. And I've also seen it when you want to make a strong story, which in the end, RGM, it's a lot about selling, internal selling to the right stakeholders. But once you fully trust the data and when you get a good grasp of the data, especially with financial acumen, then it helps to bring that story across easier, right? In these episodes, we have people from various different disciplines, different companies, different roles, different backgrounds. What kind of person would you like to see in our next episode? Or do you already have somebody in your network that you would like to refer us to?
I would certainly feel that your audience could certainly benefit someone from a data science or an artificial intelligence background. Like how are they translating 1,000 or 100,000 data points into something that can be easily understood and cascaded across different functions. So someone from data science, I believe, could be the right fit for your audience.
All right, Murtaza, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you today.